The Titanic took 2.5 hours to slip beneath the waves. On a calm spring night in 1914, another massive ocean liner vanished into the St. Lawrence River in just 14 minutes. It was carrying over 1,400 souls. Yet, if you ask anyone to name the deadliest shipwrecks in history, you'll likely get a blank stare when you mention this one. This is the RMS Empress of Ireland. It was a luxury liner, running a completely standard, well-traveled route from Quebec City heading toward Liverpool. This mechanical catastrophe would soon be buried by a calendar moving too fast for the world to look back. On the night of May 29th, the corridors down below were dark and quiet. Passengers had settled in, lulled by the steady hum of the engines. Among them was Thomas Greenaway, a Welsh coal miner heading home after 18 months away, resting with a folded drawing from his youngest daughter tucked into his coat pocket. Outside, the environment was quietly turning lethal.
A dense fog had been rolling across the river for over an hour. In 1914, decades before commercial radar, weather like this rendered a ship entirely blind. Hoping to establish their position, Captain Henry Kendall ordered the foghorn sounded, blasting a heavy warning out into the whiteout. This diagram shows the fatal error that followed. Somewhere in that mist, a Norwegian collier called the SS Storstad blew its whistle in response. The two crews exchanged signals, each trying to gauge the other's location. Based on the echoing sound, both captains misread the layout. Believing they were turning away to give each other a wide berth, both vessels actually turned their bows inward. In the wheelhouse, Kendall watched the Storstad's running lights vanish entirely into the heavy fog. Minutes ticked by. When those lights finally broke back through the mist, they were horrifyingly close. Human assumption, not mechanical failure, sealed the fate of the passengers sleeping below. At 1:55 in the morning, the Storstad's steel bow struck the side of the Empress. It sounded like an excruciating, long-drawn-out tearing of metal. You can see the pure kinetic force of that impact by looking at the Storstad itself after the crash. Its heavy steel bow was crushed completely inward. Even with a breach that large, the ship might have stayed afloat long enough to launch the lifeboats. But it was a warm spring night, and hundreds of passenger portholes had been left open. As the initial flood of water entered the tear, the Empress rolled hard to starboard. Those hundreds of open portholes dipped below the waterline simultaneously. They instantly became open drains, pulling the river directly into the ship and bypassing all internal watertight bulkheads. The collision itself didn't sink the ship at this speed. The open portholes turned a survivable accident into a mathematical death sentence. Below deck, passengers woke to absolute chaos. The power failed, plunging the narrow corridors into pitch blackness. Freezing river water was already surging through the cabins, and the starboard list was so severe that people found themselves standing on the walls instead of the floors. Thomas Greenaway woke in the dark and began a frantic climb. Fighting gravity and a crush of panicked passengers, he scrambled upward through the tilting stairwells, keeping just inches ahead of the rising water. He managed to pull himself onto the outer deck just in time to see the horizon tilt at a sickening vertical angle. As he jumped clear, the massive liner slipped completely beneath the surface of the river. From the moment the two ships made contact to the moment the Empress vanished, only 14 minutes had passed. An entire floating city gone in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. By the time the sun came up, the river was perfectly calm again. But beneath that quiet surface, 1,012 people had died. The official inquiry that followed was an exercise in frustration. Investigators concluded that both crews had completely misread the other's position. The commission placed the primary blame on the Storstad, but no criminal charges were ever filed against anyone. Across the Atlantic, the fallout was devastating. Families gathered shoulder to shoulder on the docks in Liverpool, staring out at the water, waiting for passengers who were never coming home. The initial tragedy was the loss of life, but the secondary tragedy was the total absence of accountability. So how does a maritime disaster this vast and this lethal completely evaporate from cultural memory?
The Empress of Ireland sank into a chronological trap. It happened exactly 2 years after the sinking of the Titanic, which was already dominating the public's imagination. And just 10 weeks after the Empress went down, the first shots of World War I were fired in Europe. The sudden shift to global warfare left humanity too fatigued to process another tragedy. Thomas Greenaway was one of the few who made it out of the water alive. But the drawing his daughter made for him never surfaced. It is still tucked inside his heavy coat, resting in the silt at the bottom of the river. If this story stayed with you, press like. Subscribe to Dark Archives for more true stories that history tried to bury, and hit the bell so you never miss one. Share this with someone brave enough to watch alone tonight.